The moment security escorted a black woman out of the luxury golf club, staff thought they dealt with another problem guest. They didn't know they'd just humiliated the CEO behind the $2.5 billion fund supporting the entire golf club. What started as racial discrimination in 48 hours made an entire empire collapse. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the pristine fairways of the Willow Creek Country Club, its light catching the dew on the meticulously manicured grass. Birds flitted silently among the sculpted trees, their shapes carved by expert landscapers. It was Camille Browning's first time here, and there was something almost reverent in the way she gripped her golf club, as if honoring a sacred tradition. Her light-colored athletic wear, understated yet stylish, stood out against the vibrant green of the course. The silence was broken only by the soft rhythm of her footsteps on the turf. She paused at the first tee, squared her shoulders, and then everything stopped. Two harsh voices sliced through the air like knives. "Hey, what are you doing here?" One of the security guards barked, striding toward her with purpose. Camille turned, bewildered. The two men, both white, their faces set in hard lines, closed in on her without a hint of courtesy. Their posture was confrontational, as if they were dealing with a trespasser. Neither offered a greeting. Neither considered she might belong. Before she could speak, the second guard snapped, "This area is restricted. No unauthorized visitors." His tone wasn't questioning, it was accusatory. Camille tried to explain, but she was cut off. "You need to leave. Now!" The words were cold, sharp, leaving no room for discussion. They weren't interested in understanding. They just wanted this black woman gone. Around them, white golfers paused to watch. Some whispered to each other. Others simply stared, as if witnessing an unspoken rule being enforced. None stepped in. No one asked what was happening. For many, a black woman on the course was a mistake that needed correcting. Camille took a deep breath, her gaze steady on the guard blocking her path. "I'm a member. I have a confirmed reservation," she said firmly. But the men didn't flinch. One reached for the radio clipped to his belt, muttering something about a trespasser. The other moved to her side, as if to escort her out. Her legitimacy didn't matter. Her appearance did. The guard's muscular arms seemed to inch closer with every second, each step calculated to intimidate. Camille stepped back, not out of fear, but strategy. She realized no argument would sway them. They'd already decided who she was, and nothing she said would change that. Her eyes flicked over their uniforms, their faces, their name tags. She memorized everything. The air felt heavier, charged. The breeze faded, drowned out by the weight of their stares. The course, once inviting, now felt like a stage for exclusion. This wasn't just an eviction, it was a silent declaration of who was welcome here. But Camille didn't argue. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply scanned the scene, her eyes cool and unflinching. She knew this humiliating, unjust moment would be more than a bitter memory. It would be the start of something bigger. Something they couldn't stop when it finally came. As one of the guards escorted her in silence, Camille kept her posture straight, refusing to bend under the veiled hostility. "I'm trying to talk to you," she said calmly. No response. The other guard trailed close behind, watching her like she was a threat about to strike. The humiliation wasn't just in their actions, it was in their contempt. The course remained serene, but the tension was deafening. A white couple, dressed in crisp country club attire, watched from a distance with expressions caught between unease and indifference. A man in a lowered cap discreetly recorded on his phone, but said nothing. The neutral glances from before now carried judgment. It was as if everyone agreed she was in the wrong place. "I'm a member. I paid for this round. It's all in my name," Camille pressed, her voice growing firmer. But the guards ignored her words. Their body language spoke louder than any verbal response. She had no voice here, only presence, and that presence was too disruptive to be allowed. When she reached for her phone to make a call, one guard thrust out an arm to stop her. "No phones right now. We'll sort this out with management first." His voice was controlled, but the gesture was abrupt, as if pulling out a phone was an act of defiance. Camille didn't push back. She pocketed her phone and kept walking. They led her through the club's manicured gardens to a small service entrance, far from the main lobby. No passing through the grand reception where familiar faces might intervene. It was as if they wanted to erase her presence entirely, as if she'd never crossed the gates. A symbolic detour for someone who shouldn't have been there. Inside, the corridor was narrow and dimly lit. The elegance of the main hall vanished here. Camille realized this wasn't just a removal, it was a lesson. A black woman walking these cramped halls was a silent warning to others. The prejudice in this club didn't shout, it whispered with authority. A Latina receptionist with a tight bun and white manicured nails watched the scene with wide eyes. When Camille tried to speak again, the woman looked away. It was as if she feared being linked to the situation, or maybe she'd seen this before and learned to stay invisible. At the side exit, one guard pointed to the parking lot. "You can wait out there. Management will follow up." His tone was almost polite now, dripping with unbearable irony, as if they were doing her a favor. Camille paused for a moment. She looked at both men. "Fine," she said, but inside nothing was fine. As she walked alone to her car, one detail cut deeper than the hot sun on her back, the realization that no one, not a single person, had stood up for her. The stares, the restrained smirks, the silence. It all validated what had happened. And in that complicit silence, Camille understood. Being a member wasn't enough. She had to be accepted, and in this place she never was. In the quiet parking lot, Camille's hands were steady as she shut her car door. She didn't cry. She just met her own gaze in the rearview mirror. There was anger, yes, but it was contained. It was the kind of anger that doesn't erupt. It calculates. And in that moment, she decided she wouldn't give them the outburst they might have expected. She didn't need to shout to prove who she was. She didn't need to confront to be right. What happened was too clear to ignore, and she had one advantage over everyone there. She knew exactly what she was worth. The silence she chose wasn't submission, it was strategy. Phone in hand, Camille opened the club's app and saved her reservation confirmation, the paid membership details, and proof of her active status. She documented everything. She took screenshots, enabled voice recording, and narrated a detailed account of what had just unfolded. Not for now, but for when it was time to prove this wasn't just about perception. She could still see the guards' faces, the stares that followed her, the receptionist's cold expression. It was all vivid, etched like fire in her memory. Camille whispered the names she'd read on their badges, like a mantra. She knew that soon, each of them would face something far bigger than a black woman with a golf club. While the club sighed in relief at her removal, Camille was already operating on a different wavelength. What they didn't know, and might never have imagined, was that they'd forcibly remove the woman behind the primary investment fund tied to the group that owned this very space. And she wouldn't need to raise her voice to change everything. All Camille wanted in that moment was for them to keep thinking they'd won, to go on with their routine, believing nothing would shift. Because when the blow came, there'd be no warning, just her silence, the same silence now brimming with the force of a storm about to break. Camille sat in her car, the windows cracked to let in the golden late morning light. The country club gleamed in the distance like a portrait of privilege, but to her it was just a hollow facade. She picked up her phone again, as if choosing the precise moment to pull a trigger. No hesitation, no doubt, just cold, clear conviction in every move. She dialed a specific number, pressed the phone to her left ear, her eyes fixed on Willow Creek's elegant frontage. "Activate the full withdrawal clause," she said in a low, emotionless voice. $2.5 billion, Willow Creek and all group properties. A pause. Effective immediately. On the other end, there was no pushback, just the firm response of someone who'd been waiting for this order. In seconds, the gears began to turn. Confidential alerts pinged to boardrooms, lawyers, and CFOs. Camille Browning's name sent silent alarms rippling through the structure of Whitehall Leisure Holdings. Contracts frozen, partnerships paused, credit lines locked. Every piece started moving. No fanfare, no public statement, just action. She lingered there a few minutes longer, watching the club like someone sizing up an expensive mistake about to be paid for. There was no satisfaction in her expression, just certainty that this had to happen. The decision wasn't born of anger, it was born of justice. What had been a personal moment of humiliation was now a domino effect no one could stop. Camille hung up and exhaled deeply. She knew this was just the beginning. There'd be meetings, damage control, maybe even apologies, but none could erase what happened on that course. For her, justice wasn't loud. It was meticulous, and now it was in motion. Backed by billions and the silence of someone holding all the cards, Camille Browning hadn't chosen Willow Creek by chance. Her presence on that golf course was part of something larger, a silent test, planned with precision. As a senior manager at Everlyn Equity, she oversaw strategic audits of companies suspected of exclusionary practices. There'd been reports, complaints, but no living proof. So Camille decided to be that proof. No cameras, no personal security, no institutional backup. She wanted to experience what so many had described, to walk in as just another golfer, to step onto that course not as an investor, but as a Black woman, and see how she'd be treated. The golf course wasn't the goal, it was the mirror, and the reflection sadly appeared before she could even swing. Going alone, without pre-arranging with the club's leadership, was deliberate. She knew the sharpest prejudice doesn't show when they're expecting you, but when they think you're nobody. And right from that first encounter, that's exactly what happened. The guards didn't see a member. They saw a threat, and that said everything. Camille didn't need documents. She was the evidence. The coldness of their stares, the disdain in their words, the complicit silence of the onlookers. It all confirmed the reports that once seemed like isolated incidents. What many thought was a casual visit was actually a field test, and the field failed in less than 15 minutes. She'd played her role perfectly, not as a victim, but as a strategic observer. Every reaction, every door slammed shut, exposed a deeper structure, and there was more to uncover because unknowingly, the club had left a trail, and the truth was etched beyond her memory. Inside Willow Creek, things seemed to return to normal. But in the security office, 2 screens replayed different angles of the earlier scene. Camille being escorted out, Camille trying to speak, Camille being ignored. The surveillance system, meant to protect the club's assets, now held something far more valuable: the truth. The 2 guards reappeared on the footage, walking back to the front desk, chuckling to each other. What did she think she was? Guest of honor? One said with a smirk, rolling his shoulders as if shedding a burden. The receptionist, seated behind the counter, gave a low laugh and added, "She looked lost, or maybe trying to snap a selfie on the fairway." None of them realized they were being recorded the whole time. There were no shouts, no overt slurs, but the casual mockery revealed something deeper: structural prejudice dressed up as routine. The laughter was the language, the indifference, the uniform. This woman, who to them was just an intruder, had been the target of normalized exclusion, as if it were business as usual. The camera in the side corridor caught another detail: the receptionist turning to her colleagues and saying with a cynical smile, "It's always like this when one of them shows up." This wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern, a repetition, an institutional culture, and now it was all captured in high definition. Those recordings, which in another time might have been erased or forgotten, would soon become linchpins in a much larger investigation. The club, which used cameras to bolster its prestige and security, was now trapped by its own footage. Because none of it was staged, it was spontaneous, and that made it all the more damning. Hours after Camille's call, the first red flag landed in an encrypted email at Whitehall Leisure Holdings headquarters. It was blunt: capital withdrawal in progress. Immediate suspension of funding to Willow Creek Country Club and affiliated properties. The sender, Everlyn Equity, but no one yet connected the operation to the woman removed from the course hours earlier. The earthquake had begun, and no one knew its source. Soon, other signs multiplied. Grounds maintenance contracts were frozen. Expansion projects were scrapped. A partner bank halted credit line renewals for compliance reasons. Executives, still clueless, thought it was a system glitch, but it wasn't a glitch. It was a consequence. Internal consultants scrambled through documents and reached out to Everlyn Equity. No response, just a repeated phrase in the notices: breach of institutional principles. Shareholders started asking questions. Lawyers demanded urgent meetings. And still, Camille Browning hadn't surfaced in any discussion. Meanwhile, Willow Creek's internal data showed a wave of reservation cancellations. Regular clients mysteriously changed their minds. A high-profile corporate event was canceled without explanation. Inside the local administration, No one dared admit that something serious might have happened. The silence was starting to choke them. Outside, the club carried on as if nothing was wrong. Caddies prepped clubs, golf carts zipped around, champagne flutes clinked in the panoramic restaurant. But behind the smiles and handshakes, unease simmered. A strange feeling, like something invisible was about to collapse, and the ground was beginning to shake. Camille's name hadn't leaked yet, but the damage had, and this was just the start. Whitehall Leisure Holdings, known for its quiet arrogance, was about to learn that real power doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just stops propping up what it thought was untouchable. The next morning, the glass-walled corridors of Whitehall Leisure Holdings headquarters were quieter than usual. Last-minute meetings were called, shareholders demanded answers, and the mood was tense. In the conference room, Thomas Whitaker, CEO of the holding company, waited for a full report on the recent financial freezes. He hoped for a technical error. What he got was a name, Camille Browning. He read it slowly, as if his mind refused to process what his eyes saw. "She was at Willow Creek yesterday?" he asked in a near whisper. A nervous director nodded. Thomas ran a hand across his forehead and sank back in his chair, as if he'd taken a physical hit. "My God," he muttered. The room fell silent. One executive stammered, trying to explain a security mix-up, but the words fizzled out. Everyone knew Camille wasn't just any investor. She was the strategic mind behind a billion-dollar fund. And more, she was known for operating with absolute discretion. If she'd chosen to pull out, her reasons were undeniable. "Did she warn us? Say anything beforehand?" Thomas's voice now bordered on desperation. But there was no warning, just the clause executed. Camille had done everything legally, objectively, surgically. And the more the board read the details of the cut, the clearer it became. This was a silent retaliation, not for revenge, for justice. Buried in the report was a line that sent chills through the room. "We don't invest where we have to justify our presence." It wasn't just a message, it was a verdict. And it didn't come from Camille alone. It came from the institutional weight of someone moving billions with a click. The impact of that sentence was bigger than any internal memo could contain. Without thunder, without cameras, without fanfare, the truth now stood bare. The black woman removed from the golf course like a threat was, in fact, the only reason the club still existed until that moment. And now with a single no, Camille was dismantling the pride of an entire corporation. Willow Creek's leadership was ordered to issue an urgent internal memo. The goal was clear: contain the damage. The involved guards were summoned to give statements and, without hesitation, claimed they just followed security protocols. They said Camille didn't show ID and there was confusion about her identity. But no one knew it was all recorded. The receptionist was questioned too. With a shaky voice, she said, "I'd never seen her before. I thought she was lost." But it took only a quick legal review of the camera footage for the lie to unravel. There was Camille stating her name, trying to explain, being dismissed. Every gesture captured from multiple angles, every complicit silence, every word dripping with contempt. The footage was undeniable. There was no protocol failure. There was a snap judgment based on appearance. No records were checked, no verification attempted. The decision to remove her wasn't rooted in procedure, but in assumptions. Assumptions fueled by prejudice. The kind of discrimination that operates quietly, but with devastating impact. Internally, the holding company drafted a press release. But how do you justify the unjustifiable? How do you hide what's already on video, circulating among lawyers and advisors? The crisis wasn't just reputational, it was moral. Every attempt to downplay the facts only widened the gap between the official story and the raw truth. The narrative crumbled because it never had a foundation. The club, once a symbol of status and sophistication, now carried a new label, an institution that normalized exclusion. What started with a wordless confrontation now demanded countless words, but none seemed enough. And Camille hadn't said a thing, yet she was already winning. 4 days later, Camille stepped into the spotlight for the first time, not at a press conference, but in an exclusive interview with Forbes Business Weekly. Seated in a minimalist studio, wearing a sharp black blazer and a serene expression, she spoke with the calm of someone who no longer needed to prove herself. "We invest where we're welcome," she said, locking eyes with the reporter, "not where we have to justify our existence." The line hit like lightning online. Within minutes, it was a headline, a post, a caption, a tweet. The video went viral. No dramatic music, no flashy edits. Just raw, elegant truth. Camille didn't name the club. She didn't call out individuals, but every word bled with subtext. It was impossible not to get the message. Impossible not to feel its sting. Her demeanor wasn't rage, it was resolve. While many expected a loud backlash, she delivered a surgical response. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about accountability, about the kind of leadership that turns pain into progress. The power of her words lay in their restraint, measured, and all the more piercing for it. At Whitehall, the interview sparked panic. Not a single word she said could be disputed. And what terrified them most was that Camille didn't seem finished. Her words didn't just indict a club, they indicted a pattern. She'd turned a personal incident into a collective symbol, and now her message was impossible to ignore. As thousands shared the video with words of support, Camille returned to silence. But this time, the world spoke for her. And deep down, what gnawed at those responsible was knowing she never had to raise her voice to bring the system to its knees. On the same day as the interview, a former Willow Creek employee posted a simple message on X. "This happens all the time. Black people are treated like intruders here." The raw, unembellished words were enough to ignite the internet. Within minutes, hundreds of comments, allegations, and similar stories poured in. What was once an isolated incident became part of a recognized pattern, now exposed. Hashtags gained traction. Nasha Willow Creek excludes. C. Camille Browning. Dash purposeful investing. Black influencers began sharing the story. Athletes, entrepreneurs, artists. Some recounted similar experiences at other Whitehall properties. Others just reposted the video with captions like, "This is why representation matters." The issue had broken out of the corporate bubble. News outlets jumped in. Within hours, Camille's interview was featured on CNN, Bloomberg, BBC, and even international platforms. Reporters dug deeper and unearthed old lawsuits, buried testimonies, and internal emails with racist undertones. None of it had been investigated before. Now it was all surfacing at once. Luxury travel agencies acted first. They dropped Willow Creek from their brochures. Booking platforms flagged the venue as under ethical review. A prestigious golf tournament, set for 2 months later, canceled its stop at the club. Sponsors vanished like smoke. Overnight, prestige turned into a liability. Whitehall Leisure issued a generic statement, full of empty promises. "We condemn all forms of discrimination and are committed to diversity." But the damage was done. The silence of the past now roared through thousands of voices, and every new post seemed to dig the group's reputation deeper into the ground. Camille hadn't responded to any of it. She didn't need to. To the public, the story was no longer about one woman being escorted out. It was about what that represented, about how many times this had happened to people without billions, without visibility, without a platform. Camille had cracked open a door, and through it, an avalanche of truths began to pour, with more still to come. The following Monday, Whitehall Leisure announced the firing of the 2 guards involved. The statement was curt, with no apology. The receptionist was suspended for inappropriate conduct and placed under internal review. But to the public, it looked more like erasing evidence than fixing a wrong. The firings didn't stop the crisis, they confirmed the guilt. Among investors, the mood was fury. A major European ethical fund pulled $300 million in shares. Other shareholders demanded emergency meetings. Boardroom sessions became daily and fraught. What was once a confident billion-dollar holding company now felt like a ship adrift, plugging leaks on all sides. Strategic partners began freezing contracts. A luxury hotel chain paused integration deals with Whitehall clubs. High-end sports brands cut sponsorships. Even suppliers demanded upfront payments, fearing default. It was as if no one wanted to be tied to the brand anymore. The name Whitehall had turned toxic. The local impact was swift. In just 3 days, 27% of bookings for the quarter were canceled. A group of lifetime members demanded refunds and quit. On social media, videos of other incidents surfaced. Footage of questionable approaches, leaked audio, internal emails. What started as a single case was now a systemic scandal. In a bid to manage the fallout, the holding company hired a crisis PR firm and a former senator to lead a reparation committee, but nothing seemed enough. The image was tainted, the structure shaken. And Camille, she stayed silent. She didn't attack, didn't provoke, just let the facts speak, and they spoke loudly. At its core, everyone knew this wasn't just about Camille. It was about an entire model of exclusion disguised as elegance. Those glass walls now reflected not luxury, but the ethical failure of an institution that thought it could never be challenged. But it was, and the blow came from where they least expected, someone they assumed didn't belong. 2 weeks later, on a chilly, quiet morning, Camille Browning walked through Willow Creek's gates again. No cameras, no press, just her, moving with steady steps along the same path she'd been forced to leave. This time she carried no golf club, wore no athletic gear. She was in a sleek black suit, like someone returning not to play, but to assess. Staff exchanged glances as she passed. Some looked away. Others recognized her and fell silent. The new manager, hired in a rush after the previous one's dismissal, approached with a strained smile. "Ms. Browning, welcome back." Camille gave a slight nod. Her silence said more than any rehearsed reply. Crossing the main hall, she spotted a familiar face, the receptionist who'd laughed at her weeks earlier. Now demoted, she was sorting files at a side desk. Their eyes met, and the woman quickly looked down. There was no confrontation, no words. Justice had already been served. This moment was just a reminder. Camille walked to the fairway where it all began. She stopped, took a deep breath, and gazed at the grass as if closing a chapter. The breeze brushed her face gently, as if the place itself knew things were different now. She didn't need to speak or explain. Her presence was the final statement, and those who'd underestimated her finally grasped the weight of ignoring who she was. Camille Browning's decision didn't stay confined to Willow Creek's walls. In the weeks that followed, CEOs, investors, and fund managers quietly began reviewing their portfolios. A wave of internal audits took shape. Clubs, resorts, and companies once shielded by tradition now faced uncomfortable scrutiny. Camille's case had opened a door, and many chose to step through. A coalition of Black corporate leaders in the U.S. announced a National Ethics Oversight Committee for Elite Spaces. Everlyn Equity was invited to lead. Camille declined the role, but offered a phrase that became a rallying cry. "Where doors are closed to some, there'll be no investments from others." It marked the start of a new policy of presence and calculated absence. The Willow Creek case entered MBA courses and ESG talks as a symbol of a collapse not from financial scandals, but from institutional arrogance. Companies began to see that the power of capital lies not just in money, but in the conscience of those who wield it. Ignoring that truth is a path to moral bankruptcy long before financial ruin. Camille was never ignored again. More importantly, she never had to explain herself again. Her story became a case study, her approach a benchmark, not for reacting with fury, but for acting with precision. And in the end, what echoed most in uneasy boardroom whispers was one question: how many other Camilles have we overlooked? What's the worst humiliation you've ever experienced? Would you have the courage to do what she did? It's super important that you drop your comment. You won't believe the twist that went down in this other story popping up on your screen. Check it out right now.